Big thanks to Kamado Joe for sponsoring this episode.
Let's make Texas-style barbecue ribs. The one thing that Europe and Texas have in common is that they have a profound love for smoke and salt. In Europe, it's very typical to season meat with salt, for instance with brining, and then smoke it until it's beautifully tender and soft. In Texas, they like to put a little bit of seasoning on nowadays. So to cook our Texas-style barbecue ribs, I bought some beautiful pork ribs. These are spare ribs, cut St. Louis style. You can recognize the St. Louis style cut ribs by the beautiful rectangular shape that it has. Which means if we look at the back, you can see the long bones running up till about 3/4 of the ribs. In the piece where you see only meat, there's cartilage and bone mixed up. And those are the telltale signs that you're dealing with the St. Louis style cut of ribs. Now the first thing that I want to do is take my knife and I'm going to run this knife through the membrane. I used to take it off, but nowadays I like to cut through the membrane, just to make little incisions so the smoke and the flavor from the rub that I'm going to put on can penetrate from the outside to the inside of the meat. And the big advantage is that you get to keep that membrane. It's going to turn crunchy and absolutely delicious. And as you can see, all the fat and the membrane is still sitting on the back, which means more flavor and better mouthfeel. These ribs are now prepared. It's time to start making a seasoning. I'm going to start with 2 tablespoons of a beautiful finishing salt. A finishing salt is something that is really delicate. A beautiful light and fluffy salt that's going to melt instantly when it hits meat or any type of moisture. This is smoked white piña pepper, which has a lot more flavor than ground black pepper. And don't confuse this with ordinary white pepper, because that's absolutely not the same. And about 1/2 tablespoon of this stuff is going to be more than enough. Until now, this has been a very traditional Texas style barbecue rub, but Texas has evolved. Yeah, believe it or not, they really did. They evolved their barbecue game. I'm really scared now for all the Texans.
What do you mean by believe it or not?
Oh, y'all don't know what you're talking about.
I'm going to give it a little bit of onion powder just to continue. Like, I'm getting really scared now. I have a lot of friends in Texas, and I like to make fun of them on their expense. That's not a good thing, right? Moment of self-reflection. Garlic powder, 1/4 tablespoon. And of course, if you want to, you can leave that chili powder out. It's really an optional thing, but I really like how it just makes that pepper stand out and make it even more expressive. Now take a look at this beautiful rub and the texture of it with the salt. Absolutely gorgeous. Time to put the shaker cap on, and now let's season up these ribs. I'm not looking for a thick layer of seasoning, just a little bit to give flavor to the meat, because the biggest part of seasoning comes while we're cooking. Of course, I'm going to hit it both sides. You can see I'm not letting these ribs disappear. You can still see through the seasoning, which means we only have a little bit of that flavor left. Now, as I was talking about, the most important part of adding flavor to these ribs comes while cooking. So let's fire up the Kamado Joe Big Joe. I'm using the Big Joe because it has a giant cooking rack, and I'm going to need all that surface to fit my ribs on. I'm going to start by removing the grill grates and the heat deflectors. Then I'm going to take my ash poke and run it through the leftover charcoal from the last cook. That's going to remove all of the ashes and debris that sits in the charcoal and optimize my airflow. Then it's time to add some big block charcoal, put in a couple of fire starters and light it up. And in the meantime, let's talk about the most important ingredient of Texas style ribs, which is smoke wood. Smoke wood really is going to determine the outcome of your Texas style ribs. Now, I recommend using a local type of wood that you love the most. And the reason for that is, even though we're making Texas style ribs, you have a natural preference for smoke profile. In the Netherlands, we like beech and oak the best because it's used on our fish, on our meats, just the way we're used to it. But of course, if you live in Texas, you might want to take a look at some post oak, or in other parts of the US, pecan. And these things are going to really determine what your ribs taste like. Once you decided what you're going to go for, then you got to determine how much smoke do you want to add. If you use 1 chunk of smoke wood, that's going to leave you with a little bit of smoke flavor, just the right amount of smoke profile. Now, if you're one of those guys that like a heavier smoke profile, then just put 2 chunks in. But never ever promise me put 3 chunks in. That's just overdoing it. With the 2 chunks, you're gonna have more than enough. Then you're gonna look for the color of the rib. And I'm gonna show you later what that looks like. And this time I decided to go with some oak and some apple wood. The smoke wood is going to go straight onto the flames so we get instant smoke. Then I'm going to put the heat deflectors in and the grill grate. Time to put the ribs on and close the lid. I'm going to smoke my ribs at a temperature of 120 degrees Celsius. And therefore I'm going to open up the top vent to 2 fingers open or to the second stripe. And I'm going to close the bottom vent to 1 finger open. Now of course at this moment my barbecue is still cold. All of that mass needs to be heated and that's going to take time. Don't worry about that too much. Just let the barbecue do its job and let these ribs be smoked. It took about half an hour for the barbecue to get up to a temperature of 120 degrees Celsius. Now I don't want this to go up any further, so I'm going to dial it in with the bottom vent. It was set to 1 finger open and now I'm gonna reduce that amount by half, and that's going to stabilize my Big Joe. Now I don't want to do anything about the top vent, it stays as it is, because I want the hot air and the smoke to go out. For new hot air and smoke to come in, take away that moisture, build up a beautiful crust and bark on the outside of those ribs. 3 hours have gone by and let's take a look at those ribs because look at the beautiful dark brown color that the smoke gave us. That is the color of a real smoked rib. Not covered with an insane amount of artificial flavors, but just pure natural meat. We got a red mahogany color on those ribs, and if I just press that rib a little bit, it's gonna show me just how juicy it is. Bones are starting to pop, but it's not all the way there yet. What do I need to do now to make sure I keep them like this? I'm going to wrap them up in aluminum foil. This is a super easy process. I'm just going to lift up my ribs, slide the aluminum foil under and wrap it up. Then I'm going to close the lid again and I minimize the time that my ribs were exposed to the cold. Keep that lid shut as much as possible, keep the temperature stable, and everything will be perfect. I think these ribs are going to take another half hour, and the goal here is to cook the ribs, but not to lose any more moisture, to not get any more smoke on those ribs. Therefore it's wrapped up, so we should be secure, and I'm going to check back in half an hour if they're done. Time to chop some garlic. How do you recognize fresh garlic? Well, the skin's not dried on the... Whoa! Got it. The skin's not dried out on the outside. And the big advantage of that is you don't have to peel it. An onion, chop it fine. And the bell pepper, chop it fine. Take out a pan, warm it up, put a little bit of oil in, and then I'm gonna fry the ingredients that I just chopped up. Once the ingredients turn soft, take it off the heat, let the pan cool down, put it in a blender, blitz it up, put it back in the pan, add a can of grated tomatoes, 2 tablespoons of Worcester sauce, the juice of 1 lemon, a tablespoon of mustard, a tablespoon of ground pepper, half a tablespoon of salt, half a tablespoon of chili flakes, and 2 tablespoons of sugar. And let that come up to a boil. And after about 10 minutes you should have a nice barbecue sauce like this. It's a little bit of work doing the extra steps of frying the garlic, the onion, and the bell peppers first, but in the end it's going to be all worth it when it comes together. And why do I consider this to be a real Texas barbecue sauce? Because Texans like natural pure flavors, and that means no ketchup in this sauce. The ribs should be done by now. Let's take it off the grill. Wow, those look incredible. I got my bones popping, I got that dark mahogany color. These ribs should be freaking amazing. But there's only one way to tell if they're really, really good, and that is to slice into them. Oh, buttery, buttery soft. The thick part is almost fall apart tender, well, almost. It still has a bit of bite, but it's definitely fall apart tender. I got a beautiful smoke ring, and it's nice and juicy, these ribs. Looking freaking amazing. Of course, I'm gonna try the rib first without the sauce. Oh. If America had a better healthcare system, I would move to Texas.
His name is John C.
Now with the sauce, that's it. And that's freaking delicious. I'm seriously considering moving to Texas.